Jedi Master Obi-Wan Kenobi was born on the world of Stugin and was the last Padawan of the infamous Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn. A hero of the Naboo crisis, Kenobi was elevated to the rank of Jedi Knight after Jinn's death. In accordance with his master's dying wish, Kenobi took the former slave Anakin Skywalker as his Padawan and trained him in the ways of the Jedi. A notable field agent of the Jedi Order, Kenobi was sent to the world of Kamino to investigate the assassination attempts on Senator Amidala. The investigation led Kenobi to discovering a plot by Count Dooku to instigate a galaxy-wide conflict between the Republic and the newly formed Confederacy of Independent Systems. One of the few survivors of the Battle of Geonosis, Kenobi would become one of 10 Jedi High Generals when the Order was thrust into military service during the Clone Wars. He would go on to lead Republic forces to victory at such notable battlefronts of Moonlist and Utapau, among others. He would defeat the most infamous Jedi killers of his day, such as Dirge, Asajj Ventress, Savage Opress, and General Grievous. His prowess in battle, coupled with his diplomatic skill, would earn him a seat on the Jedi Council, though his time on it would be cut short by the end of the Clone Wars, and the subsequent betrayal of his troops as a result of Order 66. Kenobi would survive the beginning of the Great Jedi Purge and would challenge Anakin Skywalker, now the newly appointed Sith apprentice Darth Vader, waging a titanic lightsaber battle that would end in Kenobi defeating his former Padawan and leaving him to die on the edges of a lava river on the planet of Mustafar. Kenobi would then go into exile on Tatooine, where he would watch over the childhood of Vader's son, Luke Skywalker, living under the assumed name Ben Kenobi, would come out of exile to aid the Rebel Alliance in the fight against the Empire, sacrificing himself in order to let Luke and his compatriots escape the Death Star. Kenobi would go on to transcend the physical plane as a Force spirit, and would return periodically to guide Luke in his training to become a Jedi Knight. Descended from a long line of Jedi, including a father and a grandfather, Corran Horn was a Jedi Master of the New Jedi Order during the early decades of the Galactic Alliance. His analytical nature, along with a strong moral compass, led him to quickly build a reputation with not only his fellow Jedi, but with the pilots and troops he would serve with. Like many Jedi of his era, Horn's training as a Jedi came very late, already a seasoned veteran of Rogue Squadron. Horn had the knowledge of his Force sensitivity, but chose not to act on it for fear of being targeted by the Empire. However, plans would change once his wife Mirax was kidnapped by a group of pirates. Realizing he would need a new set of skills, Horn delayed going after his wife in favor of becoming one of the first students at Luke Skywalker's Jedi Academy on Yavin 4. While training, Horn would quickly discover that he had little if any aptitude with telekinesis, but this was quickly brushed aside when he learned that he had incredible aptitude for the ability to create illusions, along with the energy channeling power of Tuta Menace. Despite being a mere neophyte Padawan at the time, Horn managed to display an ability with a power beyond that of seasoned masters of the old Jedi Order. Horn's sheer tenacity allowed him to quickly become one of the most skilled and powerful students of the Praxium. His actions during his time on Yavin 4 allowed him to forge strong bonds with Luke Skywalker, Mara Jade, and Cam Solusar, with whom he helped develop many of the Academy's standard training regiments. Shortly after the fall of the spirit of Exar Kun, Horn would be elevated to the rank of Jedi Knight. He would then leave the Academy and use his new skills to free Mirax, while simultaneously breaking the Galactic Empire's hold on the corporate sector. Following the outbreak of the Yuzhong Vong War, Corran would become one of the Order's premier field operatives and battlefield commanders. He would defeat the Yuzhong Vong commander Shadow Shay in single combat, along with aiding Luke and Mara in unlocking the secrets of the living planet Sonama Sekot. After Jacen Solo ended the Yuzhong Vong War with his defeat of Onami, Horn would be elevated to the rank of Jedi Master, and would be given a seat on the newly formed Jedi Council. Over a decade later, conflict would erupt yet again when events on Corran's homeworld of Corellia spiraled out of control into a galaxy-wide civil war. Despite Horn's dedication to his homeworld, he remained loyal to the Jedi Order, and did his best to help steer it through the conflict. Eventually, the Jedi's true enemy would show themselves in the face of Jacen Solo, now the Sith Lord Darth Caedus. Corran would be one of the few masters considered for the position at the head of a strike team that would aim to capture Caedus, though Battlemaster Kyle Katarn would be favored over Horn. 2 years after the death of Caedus, Horn would be involved in the Jedi Order's secret war against the Lost Tribe of the Sith on Coruscant, one of 7 members of Grand Master Skywalker's strike team to survive the ambush in the processing plant of the Jedi Temple. Horn, along with Luke Skywalker and Jaina Solo, would battle against wave after wave of 5,000 Sith stationed within the Jedi Temple. All 3 would manage to escape with their lives, though not without serious injuries. Horn was alive and well following the Lost Tribe's defeat, and his final fate remains unknown. Hello YouTube, this is the Phoenix Exalt bringing you the first installment of my Versus series, Season 2. Before we move on to the breakdowns, I would like to quickly explain the slightly changed format for this season. After each category, I will award the edge as per usual. However, starting with this episode, that edge will have a chance of factoring into the final verdict. Each edge given will act as sort of a bonus for the combatant who captures it. That being said, if the advantages cancel out, as in the case of each combatant capturing 2, then there will be no effect. This bonus system will come into play in tight matchups where the victor would likely be declared through circumstantial factors, rather than any specific superior skill or power. As for the verdict itself, I will now greater explain each of the 10 possible endings, with me naming who is being awarded a victory and where and for what reason. This will be done to minimize confusion and to give each combatant the credit they deserve for their skills. With that out of the way, for this analysis I will be using Obi-Wan Kenobi during the time frame of Revenge of the Sith, and Corran Horn from the time frame of Fate of the Jedi. I will be pulling from Legends continuity along with any canon materials that do not directly interfere with previously made Legends materials. Due to the fact that the Disney Story Group is going in a direction that is neither original nor creative, I will not be using canon as the main point of my Star Wars media for videos. As for the 2008 show, Star Wars The Clone Wars, which bridges both Legends and canon, I will be using the episodes, arcs, and tie-in materials for Kenobi that do not contradict or diminish his feats elsewhere in the Star Wars lore. As always, I own none of the characters, art, music, or other media depicted in this video, and all rights to them go to their respective companies. With that out of the way, I present to you Obi-Wan Kenobi versus Corran Horn. If these 2 legendary Jedi met on the battlefield, who would be the victor? Obi-Wan Kenobi was a human male in his mid to late 30s and was still well into his physical prime. Slim but muscular, he possessed extremely high levels of agility, speed, and stamina, capable of fighting hours on end with little to no rest. While he was not a muscular powerhouse, his strength was considerable. Kenobi's almost inhuman durability should also be taken into account. While Kenobi's capacity for taking physical pain might not be on the level of brute muscle tanks such as Darth Malgus or Savage Opress, it was easily comparable to the likes of Shaak Ti and Anakin Skywalker. He has survived being impaled with shards of glass, shot, burned with a lightsaber, blown up, gassed, crushed, and has even fought his way through over 30 armed guards and the Dark Jedi Asajj Ventress directly following months of agonizing Sith torture which consisted of him being deprived of food and water while being forced to wear a mask that dulled his senses and prevented him from calling on the Force to sustain himself, along with having maggots feasting on his innards. In short, Kenobi is a damaged sponge that won't go down easily. It's a death blow or nothing. Corran Horn was a 61-year-old human male who stood at nearly 5'6" tall while maintaining a healthy and athletic build. Unsurprisingly for a Jedi, Horn has demonstrated exceptional speed and reflexes on numerous occasions. He has augmented both through the Force to easily deflect Sith-aimed blaster bolts, along with keeping up with Council-level adepts such as Cam Solusar and Mara Jade. In terms of strength, Horn has overpowered and emotionally unbalanced Luke Skywalker and blocks strikes from the monstrous Shadow Shay. On the subject of physicality, Horn has survived being speared through the gut with Shadow Shay's Amphistaff, which is made more notable considering Amphistaffs are both venomous and dense enough to parry lightsabers. Additionally, he has survived 2 days of near constant combat against wave after wave of fresh Sith opponents within the Jedi Temple. And while he did have help from Grandmaster Skywalker and the Sword of the Jedi Jaina Solo, the mere fact that he survived with his body mostly intact was astounding. All in all, Corran Horn was an excellent example of the physicality that a human Jedi Master could achieve. The verdict for this one is almost too close to call. On the one hand, both Kenobi and Horn have taken similar levels of punishment, and not only survived, but in many cases kept on fighting. Additionally, as both are human, their respective peaks in ability are roughly the same, since neither is noted for having an exceptional physical trait other than durability. Adding that to comparable levels of speed, strength, agility, and dexterity, the answer is very close. That being said, my verdict for this matchup comes down to a matter of age. Once I realized that Corran Horn and Obi-Wan were similar enough, I decided that the only remaining factor that could come into play was age. Had this age difference been small, I would have declared the two equal and moved on. However, in this case, Corran is between 2 to 3 decades older than Kenobi, and therefore would have less endurance than Kenobi. That is not to say that Corran's endurance is low, but rather if the two could only use their physical bodies for a fight, it would be Kenobi who would be more likely to last long enough to land a finishing blow. As a Jedi apprentice, Obi-Wan Kenobi was one of the most gifted students of his generation, and a natural talent with the lightsaber. Taking full advantage of this natural aptitude, he developed into one of the greatest swords masters in galactic history, and was proclaimed by the Jedi Master Mace Windu as the greatest master of Form 3 Surisu of the era. The third form to be developed, Surisu was constructed in response to the widespread usage of energy-based weapons that rendered the forms of Makashi and Shi-Cho obsolete. It was built around tight, efficient movements intended to provide maximum defensive viability and combative longevity. Although it was originally intended solely for defense against blaster-wielding opponents, Surisu was eventually taken to the point where it was regarded that the true masters of the form were invincible to all combatants. Accordingly, Kenobi's technique was based around the core tenets of Surisu taken to the nth degree. He would use quick and precise movements and parries in order to dodge or block incoming strikes. In keeping with his form, Kenobi was a master of blast deflection unparalleled within his era. He has been described as walking through hornet swarms of blaster fire unscathed, and has even deflected a cannon shot from a vulture droid, a feat many Jedi regarded as impossible. As noted in the Revenge of the Sith novelization, Kenobi's defense was great enough to effectively stonewall the era's reigning masters of Makashi, Djem So, as well as block up to 20 strikes per second with nothing but the Force to guide his blade during his final duel with General Grievous. While it is true that Kenobi has been quoted saying that Surisu is the only form of which he feels proficient in, this is almost certainly an act of self-effacement. In his youth, Kenobi studied Ataru, no doubt at the direction of his master Qui-Gon Jinn, a noted master of the form. Kenobi would become a seasoned master of Ataru. His offense was quite varied, executing smooth transitions between power blows, sweeps, and precise cuts. He was also able to combine the tenets of both Surisu and Itaru. This was especially impressive because he was able to answer both weaknesses of the forms, Surisu's being a lack of offensive viability, and Itaru's lack of defensive viability. Kenobi also possessed a lethal proficiency with unarmed combat, flawlessly integrating physical strikes from the alternative martial art Taijutsu into his routine. Learning from his mistakes on Geonosis, he incorporated the tenets from multiple fighting forms in order to diversify his skill set, studying the forms of Shi-Cho, Shi-En, Naiman, and Jarkai dual blade fencing. In keeping with the focus of Shi-Cho, Kenobi was devastating in battlefield engagements. While it is true that Count Dooku is quoted saying that his application of Shi-Cho was clumsy and unrefined, it was later revealed that Kenobi was deliberately using basic Shi-Chu and Itaru attacks as ploys to lure Dooku into a false sense of security, and as such, I believe that his application goes well beyond this assessment. Form 5 Shien was based around aim deflection on the battlefield, and on multiple occasions Kenobi has been seen employing Shien's reverse grip. As stated in the Jedi Path, Kenobi studied Naiman with the expressed intent of integrating force-based attacks into his lightsaber sequences, a skill he would use to great effect during the Clone Wars. Jarkai was definitely the least developed of Kenobi's skills, though his absolute mastery of it was shown when he single-handedly took on both Darth Maul and Savage Opress in combat, and soundly defeated both. An active field agent and an acclaimed military general, Kenobi was regarded as one of the best strategic minds of his day, distinguished by his calm and calculating approach, and his reliance on deception and surprise tactics. He would apply these skills to combat effortlessly. He would be able to focus on the needs of the moment while maintaining a broad situational awareness, keeping opponents at arm's length with his impenetrable defense, and waiting until his opponent overextended himself, following up with a quick, precise, and lethal counter. Kenobi was also fond of using the environment to his advantage, controlling the fight to give himself the home field advantage. In a fight against an opponent he had either not dueled for many years, in the case of Count Dooku, or an opponent he had never faced before and had no knowledge of their preferred fighting style, he would begin with the basic and clumsy applications of Shi-Cho and Itaru to lure his opponent into a false sense of security. Then, when he had sussed out his opponent's technique, or was forced on his back foot, he would begin to start using Surisu, gradually shifting more and more into his preferred form. He would then wait for an opening of which he would exploit, with either a quick slash of his blade or an integration of a telekinetic strike, followed up with a slash of his blade cutting down his opponent. Kenobi is, in my estimate, how one should handle themselves in combat. Instead of becoming a jack-of-all-trades and master of none, Kenobi mastered a specific set of skills that allowed him to almost any scenario emerge victorious, or defeat any combatant he came across. Corran Horn was considered to be one of the best lightsaber duelists in the New Jedi Order, on par with the greats of his era. His skills were so renowned that as a Jedi Knight, Horn was thought by his peers to have been a swordsman compared to the legendary Anakin Skywalker. He was also skilled enough that despite his lacking ability with telekinesis, he was considered alongside Jedi Masters Kyle Katarn and Kip Duran to be team leader for the ambush of Darth Caedus. This was the same Darth Caedus who just a few days before had dueled Grandmaster Luke Skywalker on an equal footing for a time. In terms of confirmed feats, Corran Horn has dueled Council Masters Mara Jade, Cam Solusar, Saba Sabayatine, and Grandmaster Luke Skywalker in high-intensity sparring matches on an equal footing. His most notable kill was against the previously mentioned Yuuzhan Vong commander Shadow Shea, whose martial prowess was respected and feared by warriors on both sides of the conflict. Additionally, Horn has defeated several Gen Sarai warriors along with hordes of Yuuzhan Vong warriors, and lost tribe of the Sith members. As for the specifics of his technique, Corran Horn utilized both the Three Rings of Defense and Trikata. The Three Rings of Defense would remain his primary martial arts discipline for most of his career. Essentially a hybrid of the strong, medium, and fast styles, the Three Rings of Defense was a simplistic form of combat designed to introduce the students of Luke Skywalker's Jedi Academy to the principles of lightsaber combat. The main difference being that it functioned as one fluid form, rather than three separate styles. As described by Corran Horn himself, the style consisted of three sets of unique stances and maneuvers that dealt with dueling at various ranges. The outer ring consists of grand sweeping power attacks, the middle ring consisting of short, sharp strikes designed to redirect projectiles, and the inner ring using tight conservative blocks, aimed at shunting aside power attacks and parrying a probing offensive. Trikata was developed during the days of the Old Republic, and was a style built on deception and trickery, focusing on the fact that a lightsaber can switch on and off at the push of a button. The style capitalized on the fact that such a maneuver would confuse and disorient most opponents who were used to a standard style of fighting. Corran's personal style would make use of both styles he had mastered. He would use sudden style changes coupled with vicious strikes from all angles to confuse and disorient his opponents before going in for the kill. He would reinforce these sequences with both physical strikes and psychic force abilities. As for defense, Corran would use both acrobatic evasions along with blocks and parries to stop incoming strikes. Against Shadow Shay, he used the Trikata unbalancing block maneuver by rapidly flicking off his blade as the general brought down his weapon before reigniting it for a deadly follow-up. On the tactical side of things, Horn was adept at thinking on his feet, and was not above using psychological warfare against his opponents, using verbal taunts and proclamations of defeat to off-balance his opponents and give himself the edge during combat. At the end of the day, Corran Horn was one of the most subversive and lethal duelists that the new Jedi Order would ever produce. This conclusion was difficult to come to. On the one hand, one might argue that because Kenobi's saber guard was capable of blocking some 20 strikes per second, that there would be nothing that Corran could do to come out victorious. On the other hand, one could argue that Corran's Trikata allows for Kenobi's saber guard to be useless, since he is in effect bypassing all blocks that Kenobi may attempt. The conclusion I have come to blends both arguments. On the one hand, I agree that Kenobi has not been confirmed to have dueled any practitioner of Trikata, and certainly not a master such as Corran Horn. On the other hand, I don't believe that Corran could actually use this to the effect that most people believe. While Corran is fast, he cannot strike over 20 times per second, and certainly not with only a single lightsaber. Therefore, it is entirely possible in my view that Kenobi could either anticipate or simply nullify Corran's unique skill set with his own. However, that being said, I do not see Kenobi as being able to actually do anything to Corran. To begin with, Master Horn's saber defense is not exactly lax. Additionally, Corran did not employ a style that would cause him to either exhaust himself on Kenobi, nor leave himself easily open to a counter. Additionally, the only time that we have seen Kenobi defeated in his prime is by the probing offensive of Count Dooku. While Corran is not the same duelist as Dooku, it should be noted that Corran does have a style that bears some resemblance to the Count's probing offensive. Therefore, in my opinion, any pure saber duel between the two would be decided solely based on circumstantial factors, and not any specific advantage that either combatant has in their arsenal, which leads me to declare Obi-Wan Kenobi and Corran Horn equals in martial arts and lightsaber dueling. Obi-Wan Kenobi was one of 4 long-term members of the Jedi Council, and as such was a legendary wielder of the light side of the Force. Numerous sources have credited Kenobi as being a wise and powerful Jedi Master, said to have an understanding of the Force only surpassed by Mace Windu and Grand Master Yoda. As a Jedi Guardian, Kenobi was generally a combat specialist and a field agent. In keeping with this, most of his Force abilities centered around boosting his combat performance. Physical augmentation was his bread and butter, elevating his already considerable speed, strength, agility, reflexes, and stamina to the superhuman levels common to all Jedi. Obi-Wan Kenobi was a highly advanced and powerful telekinetic, ranging from blunt but powerful blows to subtle and inventive. One of his most impressive displays of telekinesis was during a mission to Felucia. While en route to the planet, his shuttle was sent into freefall. In order to prevent his death, Kenobi unleashed a force wave that uprooted several large trees, each larger than the shuttle itself, and then proceeded to carefully place the trees into position to break the shuttle's fall. This accomplishment was made all the more impressive by the fact that he was standing outside on the ship's hull, and therefore devoting most of his attention to simply staying in place. His most destructive ability was the Force Repulse, a gathered burst of Force energy that would send targets flying in all directions. Notably, Kenobi used this ability to defeat the known Jedi killer Dirge, blasting apart his body with such force that he liquefied most of Dirge's muscle tissue that made up his body. Kenobi was also highly skilled with Force throws, able to lift heavy objects and throw them with pinpoint accuracy at the desired target. Similarly, Kenobi was also a master of the saber throw, using telekinesis to manipulate his lightsaber mid-flight and take out multiple targets at once. While certainly not weak in grand-scale manipulation, Kenobi favored using subtlety to off-balance and expose his enemies. The greatest example of this would be when he used the Force to reverse the polarity of Anakin Skywalker's mechanical hand during their duel on Mustafar. Kenobi has also proven on multiple occasions that he can reliably penetrate the telekinetic defenses of opposing Force wielders. And though his passive Force shield strength is spotty at best, his active defense can block strikes from even the likes of Count Dooku and Darth Vader, and he is capable of using shields to defend himself from projectiles. Obi-Wan's strong connection to the living Force allowed him to develop into an advanced telepath. He was an expert at both the Jedi mind trick and the beast control ability. Additionally, the Clone Wars role-playing game handbook credits him with an immunity to fear effects. Although lacking any offensive-based energy attacks, Kenobi had some skill with Tutaminis, able to block multiple blaster bolts with ease, though more advanced applications seemed to elude him. Finally, Kenobi was capable of the rare art of sound mimicry. The power allowed the user to imitate any sound they had previously heard. While not lethal, it is easy to see how this ability could lead to an advantage for the user. Kenobi is most famous for his ability to transcend the physical plane as a Force spirit, surviving his death and retaining his individuality as an entity of the light side. While this ability has no known combative powers, it does speak volumes to his connection with the Force. At the end of the day, Obi-Wan Kenobi was a tactical and inventive Force wielder, the quintessential Jedi Guardian. As a member of one of the most famous Jedi families in the galaxy, it comes as no surprise that Corran Horn was one of the most powerful Jedi of his era. He was especially known for his strength and the more subversive aspects of the Force, rather than the flashy abilities. Employed by the likes of Luke Skywalker and Kip Duran. As previously mentioned, Horn was a master of physical augmentation and was able to perform the superhuman feats common to all Jedi. As for his telekinetic abilities, Horn would be the first to admit that unless he was under extreme duress, he could not so much as tickle the drool from a Hutt's lips. This remains true for his telekinetic defenses as well, having been ragdolled by every being who has attempted to do so. Horn's character sheet lists him as an influence savant, which included powers such as dominating mind tricks, complete short-term memory erasure, participating in battle melds, battle mind, projective telepathy that could cause a being to experience hallucinations, heightened sensibilities, farsight, and the beast trick ability. Horn's telepathic abilities were such that he was able to influence other trained Force users, the most notable example being when he convinced Luke Skywalker, along with the rest of his fellow apprentices, that he was telekinetically lifting a massive boulder, when in reality it hadn't moved an inch. Though it should be noted that Luke would quickly see through the illusion and break the spell. He would also cause fellow Jedi Ganner Rysode to double over and vomit via his telepathic powers, in order to avoid Ganner from foolishly beginning a fight they could not win. Next in Corran's bag of tricks came Tutaminis. Also known as Negate Energy, Tutaminis involved from taking any form of energy, be it flames, blasters, lightning, and even lightsabers, and either absorbing it or channeling it out of the body in a form of power. While not an inherently restrictive power, it was incredibly difficult to learn and master, with a practitioner to be highly commended for managing to dispel concentrating energy bursts such as blaster fire. Corran Horn is one of the few Jedi in galactic history to be credited with fully mastering the power, which implies that all forms of energy-based attacks and weapons have the potential to be negated by him. He has already used the power to absorb the heat from a volcanic spring, building-level explosions, and Ganner Rysode's lightsaber. What's more, Corran would channel the energy he absorbed into his telekinetic powers, allowing him to perform the basic pushes and shoves that a normal Jedi could accomplish. Additionally, he was able to absorb Force energy hurled at him and turn it into a shield, thereby negating Force pushes and waves. Horn's Force shields are credited with being stronger than those of Master Duran, and this is likely due to the fact that Corran could strengthen them as the power of the attack he was absorbing increased, therefore giving himself a stronger barrier. In perhaps the most notable of his feats, Corran Horn absorbed the power of several building-level explosions, and used the energy to project a massive illusion of a Jedi with a lightsaber made of flames that would be seen by the entirety of the nearby city. Lastly, it should be noted that while Corran's ability to absorb Force pushes and shoves made him virtually immune to the power, he was unable to absorb the Force Grip and Force Crush abilities, as those powers do not involve launching energy at the opponent, and therefore cannot be absorbed by Corran. All in all, Corran was a diverse and powerful Force wielder, whose lack of telekinetic power did not by any means make him weak. This is yet another hard-to-reach conclusion. To begin with, none of their non-combative abilities would come into play on an even battlefield. Moving on to the meat of it, Kenobi's usual weak telekinetic defenses would not come into play against Corran for obvious reasons, though Kenobi does not use the Force Grip or Crush abilities in combat, and therefore Corran's crippling weakness would not come into play. Corran could effectively use Tutaminis to absorb Force pushes and lightsabers, which gives Corran the edge in defenses. Kenobi is known to use telekinesis to launch projectiles, and against Corran this would be an excellent method of attack, giving Kenobi the edge in offense. However, Corran can produce convincing illusions, and while any direct telepathic attack would likely be repelled by Kenobi, Horn could use the illusions as a distraction technique. That being said, Kenobi is not stupid, and will likely figure out that Corran can absorb Force pushes rather quickly. However, that doesn't exactly negate the power, nor Corran's telepathic abilities that could potentially destabilize Kenobi. Additionally, Horn would know that in order to be victorious that he would need to force Kenobi to come to him, and since it would likely take Kenobi at least one or two attacks to figure out that Force pushes only make Corran stronger, while thrown objects do not, Corran will have several opportunities to take down Kenobi with redirected energy. However, in this specific verdict, neither combatant will have access to their respective weapons, and so Corran will only be able to dodge thrown projectiles. And considering Kenobi's smart tactical mindset, he would not be a brute and aim to force push Horn into oblivion, especially after watching Horn absorb a force push or two. He would instead attempt to launch a thrown projectile, and once he sees that this is successful and not absorbed nor redirected, he would no doubt repeat the attack until victorious. Obi-Wan Kenobi gets the edge in force abilities. Obi-Wan Kenobi wielded a standard Jedi lightsaber for his day, with a blue Ilum crystal for the focusing lens. Other than familiarity with his own handiwork, it provided no special benefit, and neither did his standard brown Jedi robes. Corran Horn wore the standard green robes of the Corellian Jedi, and wielded a lightsaber that was uniquely constructed out of the spare parts of a speeder bike. Corran's lightsaber was what was originally known as a dual-phase lightsaber. While most lightsabers had a dial that could change the length of the blade, a dual-phase lightsaber allowed for the rapid lengthening or shortening of the blade during the midst of combat. Corran's default setting was a blade of the standard 1.5 meter length that was powered by a silver Adegan crystal. When the dual-phase setting was activated, the power system would switch to a violet Adegan crystal, and his blade length would double to 3 meters, resulting in a purple blade that was just short of 10 feet in length. Corran was seen typically employing this blade against multiple opponents, but was known to use it as a surprise tactic, as suddenly having doubled the reach can provide obvious benefits in the midst of combat. Due to the fact that Corran Horn's unique saber provided him with extra options, Jedi Master Corran Horn will get the edge in weaponry and equipment. And now, the verdict. For this fight, let's say it takes place in the Jedi Temple sparring arena on Coruscant, with multiple loose objects of various sizes for the combatants to use. Additionally, let us assume that for the purpose of this fight, neither combatant recognizes the other, because one or both combatants recognizing each other would cause an uneven playing field. Additionally, neither combatant will have time to prepare for the battle, and the fight will start with both combatants in full view of each other. As a final tally for this matchup, I see the victor winning 6 times out of 10. This will be a description of one majority victory. Let us begin. The early fight would likely see neither of our two combatants gaining any edge over the other. Both Corran and Obi-Wan would be looking to get a read on their opponent, and neither would be particularly eager to rush in head-on. Corran would likely immediately realize that Kenobi is a defense-oriented fighter, and would therefore aim to get past his guard through either trickery or superior skill. Kenobi would likewise instantly realize the skill of his opponent, along with realizing that such a delicate and tricky-based offensive would be deadly if he wasn't careful. As for force abilities, Kenobi would usually only use them to either gain a tactical advantage in response to an opponent using theirs, or as an act of desperation, and while Kenobi may find such a tactical edge, it is unlikely that he could find it so early in a fight, as Corran Horn does not leave himself open like that, especially not so early. In the end, neither combatant will be able to claim a victory so early in this fight. The mid-fight would likely see Corran take 3 of the possible 10 victories. These would be likely due to Corran's use of trickery and his unique force abilities. I can see one victory where he absorbs an attack for Kenobi and redirects it with deadly accuracy. Another victory may come by the way of Trikata, coupled with his dual-phase lightsaber. and a third from his illusions being used as a distraction method. Kenobi would not take any victories here. This is largely due to Kenobi being oriented as a late fight combatant. He prefers to wait and see what his opponent has before he takes the fight to them. Unfortunately for Kenobi, in the mid-fight, Horn would have a lot to show before he exhausted his bag of tricks. As previously stated, Horn would be aiming to capitalize on his unique skill and weapon set, looking for any opening to either directly attack Kenobi or simply distract him long enough for a killing blow to be struck. Kenobi would likely have finished getting a read on his opponent, and would begin looking for tactical advantages. This could mean drawing Corran to a location of his choosing, or perhaps simply weaponizing the battlefield that he is currently in. In either case, Kenobi would be ready to go going into the late fight. The late fight would likely be a slugging match between the two combatants. Kenobi would be utilizing everything he could to bring down Corran. He would loosen the ceiling and nearby pillars to use as weapons and traps. Kenobi would turn nearby chairs and rocks into makeshift shields, as he not only kept up his stalwart defense, but pressed the attack. Corran would likely have activated his dual-phase lightsaber, and kept it on by this point in order to keep Kenobi at arm's length, while he relied more heavily on his Trikata tactics to get in close when necessary. As for how the points break down, Kenobi and Corran would each take a circumstantial victory. Additionally, I will give Kenobi 2 victories for successfully using a thrown projectile to blindside Corran, and another victory for the possibility of successfully defeating Corran through his dueling skills. This leaves the two tied up as we go into the last 2 scenarios, in which I had some decisions to make. I awarded the last 2 victories by the way of who would be the most likely to make something out of the tools that they had. As I thought over the scenarios, I came to the conclusion that the most likely way that one combatant would be victorious was countered by their opponent. Kenobi's saber skills should not be underestimated in any way. However, I quickly realized that Corran could counter them. For one, victory, his probing offensive may be enough to delicately slip past the guard of Kenobi. Perhaps not through dexterity as Count Dooku did, but through Trikata and trickery. Additionally, even if Kenobi went in to cut down Corran, the Corellian Jedi could simply absorb Kenobi's lightsaber and use it to launch a devastating force attack. So, at the end of the day, I had to award Corran Horn the advantage in the late fight. And thus, I declare Jedi Master Corran Horn the victor. Inspiration for this matchup came from a viewer like you. In this case, it was Kirill Zakharov who gave the suggestion. As for my explanation of the verdict, the victor was decided after some long and hard thought on the matchup, as the two are very closely matched. However, when you examine Corran Horn, you quickly realize that his value as a combatant is greater than the sum of his parts. While yes, he is a master swordsman, and yes, he is a master force wielder, the way he blends both elements together with his tactical abilities causes Corran to become an elusive fighter that seems to just laugh at whatever you throw at him while returning it with equal if not greater force. Kenobi is very close to being on Corran's level in this regard, but is held back due to the straightforward nature he usually applies to his abilities. Kenobi's masterful saber skills only follow a few of the classical styles, and while he has begun to experiment with a personalized style, he is not as close to Horn in this regard, and Kenobi certainly hasn't seriously studied any rare styles such as Trikata, which Corran is a master of. Additionally, Corran's fighting style is a nightmare scenario for a Surisu master. He isn't trying to batter down his opponent's guard, or outlast them. He wants to slip past it like it's not even there. For all of Kenobi's skill and his near unbreakable saber guard, Corran's probing offensive will prove deadly, though not on its own. Corran will take his offensive and combine it with his unique force abilities. Illusions will materialize for Kenobi. A counter-offensive with the Force or his lightsaber will be absorbed and unleashed upon him. If Corran only had his unique force abilities, or only had his unique saber skills, I would be very hesitant to give him the victory. but because he has both, and he blends them together so effectively into a style that hits Kenobi in his weak points, while covering for Corran's own weaknesses, we have a clear answer. Jedi Master Corran Horn is proclaimed victorious in this contest. That being said, keep in mind that this is all my opinion of a hypothetical matchup, and feel free to leave comments, criticisms, or suggestions for future matchups in the comments down below. I would like to thank you all for watching the first episode of the second season of the Versus series. As a reminder, I will be taking suggestions for future Season 3 matchups, and these suggestions can be in the form of a specific matchup, or simply a character you would like to see me use. As you can see in this season, I am using those fan suggestions. Those of you that suggest a matchup that is featured will receive a shoutout at the beginning of the video. And yes, if you suggest a matchup that has already been suggested, or I have already decided on, you will still receive credit so long as that video is not out yet. This is the Phoenix Exalt, signing out, and may the Force be with you, always.